It's a little terrifying because you absolutely cannot miss.
Goalies now are completely at a premium.
Not, right? Like, Canada doesn't have a ton of great options.
What's up, everybody? Welcome to the Hockey News Big Show. I'm your host, Katie Gaus, joined as always by Michael Traikos and Ryan Kennedy. And yes, I lost my voice over the weekend. It is slowly coming back, but that just means that you guys are going to have to talk even more than normal. I must have been cheering too hard at that Jays game that I was watching.
Yes.
Yeah, we'll go with that. But guys, we got lots to get to. And we'll start it off with you, Michael, because I know you were at one of the games that we had on the NHL slate last night with the Maple Leafs and the New Jersey Devils. So we saw Jack Hughes earning the hat trick, third of his career. They get the win over Toronto. And throughout the game, Hughes was basically able to do whatever he wanted all night long. So you were there firsthand. Just kind of give us your thoughts on what this game showed, either good or bad, from both of the teams. Because obviously the Devils are off to quite a start. Toronto still seems to be figuring things out. Not sure exactly what's going on there, but what did you see?
Yeah, I saw a tale of two teams, Katie. And this was Toronto's probably their first big test of the season when you look at who they've actually played.
Right.
And it did not go well for Toronto. We saw a Devils team that looks very, very fast. And, that's going to be probably a theme for the Devils all year is, can other teams keep up with the style of game that they play? But let's talk about Toronto. And boy, oh boy, did they look slow. And that's going to be a factor. And, I'm going to say it now. We're probably, 3 weeks into the season. And I was wondering when I was going to have to break this out. But the Toronto Maple Leafs really do miss Mitch Marner. And,
oh, no.
Yeah, I thought that this was going to happen. How do you not miss a guy that was a 100-point player and does so many things on the offensive zone? And for sure, Mitch Marner is a big miss when we're talking about Austin Matthews in his line. And Austin Matthews is scoring, but, as Craig Berube said last night, the sustained pressure just isn't there. But the other thing that Mitch Marner really brought to the Leafs that they're missing right now is, what he does in the defensive zone. And he breaks up plays, he takes away pucks, he kills penalties. And I think that's what really the Leafs are missing. And you saw it last night with so many odd man rushes where, the Leafs just could not keep up with the Devils. But, we'll see how they can find an identity in a Marner-less roster. But it's going to be difficult.
Well, I know you guys talked about the Stolarz comments on Monday and obviously kind of just calling out the team. And when you watch some of the parts of these games, like, I don't know if you get the same sense as I do, but it really does feel like the intensity, the heart, the battle level. I'm not sure I'm necessarily seeing it. Chicklets tweeted last night or maybe today a clip from the game where they gave up a 4-on-1 that led to a goal. I mean, that's like they said it was full beer league mode. I've never seen that, or very rarely do I see a team giving up a play like that. So Ryan, I'm curious, just when you're watching the team, what sense you're getting about kind of, is there a lack of culture, a lack of compete right now, or is this just they're not sure exactly what their identity is without Marner?
I think it's the latter there, that last one, Katie, where they're still figuring out what they are and who plays which role. And, you look at the game last night in particular, if you look at the line combinations, it really feels like, like Matthews and Nyes, like that's a tandem, right? And they work really well together. Yeah. But who else is on that line? And, they tried Max Domi for most of last night. And with that trio, they got completely caved in possession-wise, like 29% in terms of Corsi 4, which is terrible. Yeah. They put William Nylander on that line instead of Domi for a bit, and they dominated. 8-1 were the shot attempts, like 88%, almost 89%. Now, if you have Nylander on that line, then he's not with John Tavares on the second line. So I think it really comes down to putting this puzzle together, and it's not there yet. Now, is Easton Cowan, who did not play last night, which is fine, young guy, it's good to see a little bit from the press box early on,
Yeah.
But I wouldn't be surprised if we see Cowan back on that top line where, I mean, I was at the Nashville game and Cowan was very active, made a lot of good things happen with Matthews and Nyes. And maybe that is the route forward. And, finally, I would say, like, to that end, if Cowan's up there, then, are there a couple of passengers on the Leafs that need to get into gear? I think that's something that Craig is figuring out right now, is like who's actually contributing in a positive way.
Mm-hmm.
It's so difficult for the Leafs to break in Cowan as an NHLer, Ryan. I agree with you. I think Cowan is a top line guy, but it's, he's a rookie and he's trying to find his legs in the NHL, and you're thrusting him into top line minutes where you're going to be facing the other team's best defense. I think that's the challenge for Craig Berube. Is like, he loves Easton Cowan, but he probably loves him more as a third line option right now. And yet, a lot of this would be settled when Scott Laughton comes back, and then he can go to the third line, and you can kind of throw Cowan up there, or you could throw Max Domi again. I don't like Max Domi on the top line. I'm kind of with you, but I bet we see a lot of the Nylander Matthews option going forward. Similar kind of when you look at the Edmonton Oilers, they always seem to find McDavid and Draisaitl on the same line.
Well, I remember when I was in Colorado, it was kind of the same fail-safe option for Jared Bednar, right? When things weren't going great. All right, let's pop Mikko up with Nate, get that thing going, get the offense flowing. But at the same time, you want to find other options for those top lines because you want to spread out the talent, right? You don't want to necessarily be like, wow, we are truly a one-line team right now with our production and things drop off. The trickle-down effect obviously comes into play. And like you mentioned, Ryan, getting Scott Laughton in the mix adds to the depth that they maybe don't have as much of right now. All right, well, let's switch gears. Let's, talk about, we just mentioned all the struggles post-Marner era. Well, Mitch seems to be doing just fine out in Vegas. 10 points in 7 games, 4-game multi-point streak, averaging more ice time than normal. He +9. So he's certainly in a good spot from a statistical perspective. Seems like he's liking it. He's on pace for 117 points. Again, some of the paces right now, it's the beginning of the season, so you see crazy numbers like this guy's going to score 87 goals. And it's like, really? I don't know about that. Regardless, he's certainly doing well. Do we think that he ultimately could be more dangerous of a player in Vegas than he was in Toronto?
It's a tough question because he was super dangerous in Toronto, but I think, with the lineup Vegas has and the chemistry that Marner has already found with Jack Eichel, I think you're getting maximum Mitch right now. And he's comfortable, which is awesome. The transition was seamless, and why wouldn't it be, right? Like, Jack Eichel is a premier number 1 center. And we've talked about this on the show before. Like, Jack Eichel, he's an unselfish player, but he can also really rip the puck. So whether he needs to be the distributor or the trigger man, he can do both. And, Marner, we know, is an elite playmaker. But Vegas also has that depth where, talk about Pavel Dorofeev and the incredible start he's gotten off to on a different line. That depth just makes the Golden Knights so deadly because you can't necessarily just concentrate on Marner and Eichel. You also have to worry about Dorofeev and, Mark Stone when he's healthy, and Thomas Hertl. Like, the list goes on, and that's why the Golden Knights are sitting where they are right now.
I think it's a matter of, Mitch Marner looked dangerous in Vegas, but more importantly, to Ryan's point, everyone he plays with looks really dangerous. And Dorofeev,
in the league in points.
Cassidy's been throwing him. Like, I looked at his usage, and Cassidy's been putting Marner with both lines. So he's played a bit with Jack Eichel, but he's also played with Dorofeev on that line with Thomas Hertl as well. And you look at Vegas's top 6, and obviously Eichel, I think, still leads the league in points right now, and Dorofeev is like the goals leader, but all their top 6 forwards are averaging a point a game or more, which is kind of incredible. Like, to have that sort of top 2-line depth right now, and that are just kind of firing all cylinders. And it's like, doesn't matter who he plays with, he's clicking with chemistry.
Yeah, the Golden Knights are looking scary. I mean, the only weakness you can really see is, obviously they've got some key injuries right now. But goaltending, kind of the only question mark because you've got Akira Schmid kind of coming in now with Aiden Hill going in and out. They have Carter Hart waiting in the wings, so who knows what that could look like once he's eligible starting on December 1. But there's not a whole lot of chinks in the armor, so to speak, for the Golden Knights. So we will see if Marner continues to produce at that level. It doesn't look like any of them are slowing down. It's interesting to see the way they started the season. All right, speaking of not slowing down, these guys love to play fast, and they look like soul line mates playing together. Colorado Avalanche forwards Martin Necas and Nathan MacKinnon. They're dominating. They're having fun. They look like they've been playing together for a very long time. So Necas is up there in that top of the NHL scoring department. He's at 11 points right now. Obviously, Eichel's at the top with 16, but he's right in the mix. Not only is he doing well, but MacKinnon, like I mentioned, he clearly has chemistry, likes playing with him. And the point of this is that a happy Nate matters. They took away his Mikko Rantanen. They gave him Martin Necas. So I do feel like it will be important for the Avalanche to find a way to keep him. That being said, how much will it cost to keep Necas? And then when you kind of consider the bigger picture of what happened when Mikko kind of went to the market, sort of, he got to play the market from his own new team, but he got 12 million. So what do we think that the Avs need to give up to keep Necas versus what we would maybe see him get on the open market, Michael?
You can't give him 12 million. That's
Nate's making
for
12.6.
sure. Well, the problem is, Katie, and it really is a nice problem to have that Necas is probably pricing himself to the point where the Avs have to make a tough decision. Is you've got to save some money for when Cale Makar comes up, and his contract is going to come up, and there's already talk about, will he break the bank and, get as much as Kirill Kaprizov this year? And,
I don't know.
You've got to keep money around for that possibility because, if he wants that much, then what do you do if the Avs say no?
No, you quite literally cannot do anything.
So it's tough. Like you want Necas at a good value, but the longer the season goes on, forget a good value. You're going to have to overpay for him.
Yeah, Ryan, what do you think?
I'm thinking the number is 11 million.
Ooh, that's a lot.
It is a lot, but you can't lose another top line winger.
I know.
After you lost Mikko Rantanen, because you're still in your window. You have MacKinnon, you have Makar, you have Devon Taves back there. If you're Colorado, what you're saying, and again, cap's going up, so $11 million sounds like a lot, but in a couple of years, it's more like 8 or 9 million, right? In terms of what we're used to.
Yeah.
If you're the Avs, like you could win the Stanley Cup this year. You could win it next year, right? Okay. But to your point, Mike, you do have to resign Makar eventually. They should have the space just because of the cap going up. They have to be smart about it. But I think what you say to these players is like, look, like sign long-term, 7 years under the new CBA. Stay here. We have success. Denver's a lovely city, especially if you like the outdoors. We've got something here. And Necas is 26 years old right now, so he's in his prime. You're going to pay for his prime years. And I think you just have to make it happen because otherwise you're kind of like, unless they find somebody else via free agency, which is a roll of the dice, you're kind of giving up on the Central. And I don't think you can do that when you have two of the best players in the NHL in MacKinnon and Makar. You have to have that supporting staff.
Yeah. Landeskog also, like I was looking it up thinking, his contract's probably coming up soon. He's signed until 29.
Because he signed a relatively pretty big deal right before all the craziness with the injury happened. I think it was maybe a year or two right before it. So he was maxed out on that. At the time was a pretty hefty number, but now it's seeming like it'll be just fine. But yeah, they don't have to worry about him. It's just Cale, and I want to say 2 years for Makar this season and one more season. So, I don't know. I mean, Kale loves it there. They seem happy. I could very much say that I think he would take a more team-friendly deal. Not saying he's going to completely chop a whole lot of money off like we saw McDavid doing, but I think he would want longer term. But I do think he would take money to keep the team competitive. It's just sort of his vibe. It's kind of his personality. We'll see. All right. Well, we had number 1 picks Matthew Schaefer for the Islanders and Macklin Celebrini for the Sharks, going head to head for the first time in their careers, the last 2 number 1s. So, which player do we think will have the greatest long-term impact on their respective team, right? We know Schaefer is off to an incredible start. He had 2 points last night. Celebrini got another goal. The teams are in different places right now, obviously. The Sharks are still looking for their first win of the season. But when you think about big picture and the development of these 2 guys and just their roles, I know they're obviously forward and defensemen, but Ryan, who do you think kind of could be the more perennial long-term impact player for their team?
This is such a tough question. I feel like I'm picking between my children here because I default to centers. But in this case, when you see what Matthew Schaefer has done as a defenseman, he is just as impactful. And that's what makes it really difficult for me. And, you have that sort of recency bias where obviously Schaefer is off to this, incredible point streak. Celebrini hasn't had as much success, but at the same time, he doesn't have as much as a surrounding cast in San Jose right now. So I'll say Celebrini, which gives Mike an opening to pick Schaefer, and I would not fault him whatsoever for it, only because I do love the elite number 1 center, and I do believe that at the end of the day, because of his battle level and because of his skill, once Celebrini has more veteran talent around him, and once some of those other young guns in San Jose continue to mature with him, like a Will Smith, then, the Sharks will be in a good place. It's just right now is not that good place.
Totally fair.
Thank you, Ryan. And I'm gonna take Schaefer in this pick. And really it's, Celebrini's line mates or teammates probably are the defining reason I'm choosing Schaefer. If Celebrini doesn't work out, you still got Will Smith hockey, you still got William Macklin, you got Michael Misa. You've got forwards that can carry the load, even if they didn't have Celebrini. Whereas, the Islanders only have Schaefer on the back end. Like, they no longer have Noah Dobson. And even if they had Noah Dobson, like, Schaefer's just in a class amongst, by himself, it seems like, or he's going to be. So, defensemen play more minutes. If the Islanders had more surrounding talent around him on the back end, or even up front, I would maybe lean towards Celebrini. But yeah, I think both guys are going to be fantastic.
Yeah.
It's just a matter of, San Jose just has, so many forwards that I think are going to be maybe not franchise studs, but Michael Misa, what was he, 2nd overall pick? Like, he looks like he's going to be, give him a couple more years, and it'll probably be a 1-2 punch of Celebrini and Misa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they certainly have. San Jose has a lot to be looking forward to. That being said, does it take away from what Celebrini will mean to them? And again, like you said, Ryan, right now it's so easy to default to anything Schaefer with the way he started off and the impressive performance we've seen, which again, from a guy who, there were people thinking he may not even be full-time NHL this year. Like, does he need more time in juniors? He didn't play a lot. He had the injury last year, and he's making that case pretty easy that he belongs right where he is for the whole year and many more. All right, well, how about Lane Hutson, Thatcher Demko, and Brock Boeser all added to Team USA's preliminary roster after not being invited to that 2-day orientation camp back in August. So obviously Team USA, like Team Canada, stacked with talent, so many good players for only a few spots. But of the 3 I just mentioned, who do we think has maybe the best chance of actually making their way onto that U.S. Olympic team? Ryan?
This is another tough one because, like, Lane Hutson's the splashiest name there, But Team USA's defense is also their most marquee position. Like if you look at that Four Nations team, like who do you bump? Adam Fox? Like Noah Hannafin? Like that's pretty tough because you might say like, oh, well, Brock Faber's not a really big name, but Brock Faber was incredible in that tournament. And, talking to Connor Halebuck in the summer, he talked about Faber and Slavin in particular and how amazing they were in front of him as a goaltender. So, Connor Halebuck's going to lobby for them to be back.
Yeah.
With Demko, I mean, you're really only talking about either, injury problems, or do you say if Demko's super hot, do you take him over Jeremy Swayman as your third? I guess that would probably be my answer. Like Hellbuck and Ottinger are the obvious 1-2 punch, but for that third goaltender, I think there is a nice little grouping of American netminders that you could go with. So if Thatcher Demko plays his way into that spot, I think he's probably the answer to this question.
Yeah, that you make a really good point about Lane Hutson, Ryan, and talking with Bill Guerin yesterday. He basically said the same thing. It's a tough defense to make. Like you got to remember, Four Nations, Quinn Hughes wasn't even on that team because of the injury. So he has to work his way on the team, which means maybe like a Hannafin or someone doesn't make that squad. And well, let's face it, 21-year-old Lane Hutson is going to have a lot of opportunities to play for Team USA.
Right.
He'll probably, along with Schaefer, be there in the French Alps in 2030. But to your question, Katie, I actually think Brock Boeser might have the easiest path. And he's got off to a pretty good start, 3 goals in, I think, 5 games. You got to think Chris Kreider, I would say at the beginning of the season, he doesn't make that team. Now I'm not so sure. I may have to couch my answer, but I still think that he might be a bubble guy that doesn't make the team. And Brock Nelson is another guy I think might end up not making that team. And if so, there might be an opportunity for the U.S. to take a sniper in Boeser.
Right. I like it. I know, again, it's so interesting. Like thinking about the Four Nations team and what worked, and then thinking about guys that didn't do anything last year, maybe not as much as you expected. Now all of a sudden they're hot and it changes. The guys making these decisions for Team USA and for Team Canada, they've got a lot of good problems, but it is definitely a challenge to decide exactly what works for these teams because of the talent pool that they're choosing from. All right, well, we got another great story, and this one I brought up because I can't help myself. Spencer Knight's one of my favorite players of all time, unbelievable human being, and it's great to see that he is having an awesome start to the season with Chicago, a .937 save percentage, 1.96 goals against average. We know that he's faced some personal adversity, had to take some time away, then ultimately got traded by the Panthers in the Seth Jones deal. So he was drafted 13th overall back in 2019. He was a part of that incredible U.S. team, and then obviously with BC. So highest goalie selected since Jack Campbell in 2010. And we know that goalies can take longer to develop. Sometimes they never live up to the hype. We'll talk about that in a second. But could Knight be the next big-time starter that Chicago desperately needs? Is this kind of like the beginnings of what we think is his career finally coming to fruition, Michael?
Yeah, well, he's only 24, Katie, and I actually have to look it up here because I'm like, no way he's only 24. But he came to the NHL at such an early age because of all the hype and just where he was at that point. But goaltenders, how old is Anthony Stolar? Is it he finally became like a quote unquote #1 goalie just last season or even this year? And usually 26 is the average age, I would say, when you start really making an impact. So I'm with you. Spencer Knight is a great story, and I think maybe people did write him off when he was going through those issues. But again, he's got his whole career ahead of him, and Chicago's going to need a goaltender to kind of be that guy if the Blackhawks are going to take that next step.
Yeah, our producer in here putting in Stolarz is 31. So I mean, again,
31. Wow.
Yeah.
Some time to find, not just to find your game, but to be in the right environment for the type of goalie that you are, working with the right system. Sometimes it never pans out. Sometimes they surprise us. So 31 for Stolarz, certainly coming into his own. Ryan, I want to kind of take this question in a slightly different direction for your perspective. Because like I mentioned, Knight was that first goalie to be taken in the first round since Jack Campbell in 2010. So now looking ahead, since 2019, there have been 7 goalies picked in the first round and 3 picked in the first round since 2022. Obviously, we had the 2 that you mentioned to me earlier in 2025. Do you think the teams are picking goalies less in the top round of the draft? What's your thought on kind of the goalie selection approach these days?
Oh, yeah, it's completely different than it was 20 years ago. Like, you have to think, around that time, like goalies were going first overall, right? Like Marc-Andre Fleury went first overall. Rick DiPietro went first overall. And yeah, they became starters, but then you got into a scenario where, and Carey Price went 5th overall. Obviously, that was a good pick. But you had other goaltenders that were taken in the first round that never saw the NHL. And I think because we've seen so many like Hall of Famers who were drafted in like the 7th round, or as I always like to joke, like Pekka Rinne was drafted so late, that round doesn't exist anymore, right? So because you need so much time as a goaltender to develop, and because when they're teenagers, particularly like if you're in Europe, maybe you're a backup in like the SHL or, Finland's Liga, and you're not getting a lot of starts, but you have tremendous raw potential and you've got that big frame.
Yeah.
You just never know, right? And that's the thing with goaltending is, they need reps, and there's so much to the mental game, and there's so much to how you develop and where you're getting your starts and who your goalie coaches are, that it almost behooves teams to, I'm not going to say throw darts at a dartboard, but I will say like it's almost better to take a chance on somebody in the back half of the draft and hope they develop, rather than looking at a player who maybe was in a great situation and, warrants a first round pick, but then the pressure is on, right?
Yeah.
You look at like Sebastian Cossa in Detroit, he's still developing. He was one of those first rounders you mentioned. But that was, I think, 5 or 6 years ago at this point. And there is pressure on GMs. Like if you have a first round pick, you got to make sure that kid plays while you're still employed, or you might not be employed anymore.
Whoa,
So
right.
I think, the way that it's going now, if you think you've got a surefire guy like a Spencer Knight, then yeah, go for it. But otherwise, like I can understand why teams are a little more reticent to pick a netminder high, because the stakes are just, they're weird.
I feel like you got to have 2 picks in the first round to want to burn one on a goalie, Ryan.
That's
That
fair.
being said, that guy better be tall. Okay, you better be 6'7".
And that's what San Jose did this year, right? They had Michael Misa 2nd overall. But then with, I think it was the 30th pick overall, Joshua Ravensbergen, who is 6'5" and was one of the best goalies in the class. So there you go.
I should be a GM, right? Just hire
and
me.
it makes it even
Super
more
easy.
interesting, like when you looked at, because like a part of the biggest concern with, or I guess the question around Spencer Knight is when they got him, they used that 13th overall pick to get him. And then Dale Talon immediately went out and got Sergei Bobrovsky for, at the time, the largest contract ever given out to a goalie or anybody. It was huge. So it was like, wait, you just used your number 1 pick, and now you're getting a giant goalie who's going to be your guy for quite a while. But then he ended up faltering early, which is why Spencer Knight was thrust so soon into a role in the NHL. I mean, the kid was playing playoff games in his first year with them, like against the Tampa Bay Lightning. And I think his development almost got like screwed up, and he had to like hit the reset button, start from scratch, go to the AHL. And like, so it almost took that extra year or two because he sort of got thrown into a situation that maybe wasn't expected right away.
Hey, Katie, when the Montreal Canadiens drafted Carey Price, they booed him because Jose Theodore had just won the Hart Trophy that season. So they're like, why are you wasting a top pick on a goalie? You fools. And then
because things change.
Well, yeah, Carey Price, not a bad guy to have on your roster. We all know that now. But certainly it's interesting. Goalies is something that I think we could talk about for quite a while, because they are truly the most unique creatures, not just who they are personally, but their development, their paths, and the way they find success is unique. All right, well, let's talk about big picture item here for a second. Looking around all the divisions, and we talk about them all the time, the teams that are kind of the expected standard to be making the playoffs every year. And if you consider it, at least for the last little while, we've been talking about the same few teams that we expect to be in the playoffs from each division, kind of those standard picks. So for the Central, it's Colorado, Winnipeg, and Dallas. The Pacific, we've got Edmonton, Vegas, LA, Vancouver kind of coming in and out of that mix. In the Atlantic, we've got Florida, Tampa, and Toronto. Boston also getting in the mix there. And then in the Metro, you've got Carolina, New Jersey, and the Rangers, maybe the Islanders. Some teams kind of shifting in and out. But the point I'm making is that it's been relatively consistent with kind of who the top dogs are in each division for the last few years. So now that we're starting to see some different teams in the mix, things may be starting to change a little. I just want to ask you guys kind of what you think about how this is going to shape up looking ahead. So which divisions do you think will be the first to start to experience that changing of the guard, right? You've got teams that are aging. We obviously saw what happened to Pittsburgh as their core got older. We're seeing what's starting to maybe happen with a team like Tampa. Are they getting older? So start us off, Michael. Which team do you think which division do you think will be the first one to start to experience this change where we're seeing a whole slate of new teams, making the playoffs more consistently?
Yeah, I'm going to go with the Atlantic. And yeah, I just see a changing of the guard almost happening, this season. Detroit looks like a different team this year than they did in past years. Montreal, I was talking about New Jersey earlier with their speed. Montreal might be the quickest team I've seen so far in the NHL this year. So those two teams right now that I could see unseating, maybe a Toronto, maybe a Tampa. If Florida's injury bug keeps up, maybe a Florida even. So, and then I didn't even mention Ottawa, who made the playoffs last year and are sort of not looking like the same team that they were last year. But again, a lot of youth on that team, and all it takes is, Linus Ullmark to really find his game and start standing on his head. And then maybe Ottawa could be that third team there.
Mm-hmm. All right, Ryan, what do you think? Kind of where you see the change happening?
Yeah. You know what? Originally, I was going to say the Central because, Utah's looking really solid, and you always have St. Louis as sort of a spoiler / upsetter. But I don't see those top three teams necessarily getting unseated in the standings. So I'm actually going to go with the Metro, where I think it's the most fluid division. And I would argue at this point, it's basically like Carolina. And then everybody else,
I agree.
Who knows, right? Like New Jersey, now that they're healthy, they look like the Devils squad that we kind of assumed they would be last year or the year before. And then obviously last year, because of the Jack Hughes injury, they kind of went out with a whimper in the first round of the playoffs. So I think with the Rangers struggling, like in terms of points percentage, the Rangers are last in the Metro right now. It's just they've played more games than most teams. I don't know if Pittsburgh can keep up their early success. I don't know if Washington is still for real or not because they have an older lineup as well. That's what's so interesting to me about the Metro is that it feels like it's pretty wide open for slots, 2 through 4 right now.
Yeah, there's not as much of like a guard established there. And even as I was writing out the question, I was like scrolling back through looking at the wild cards rankings every season going back a few years. And that one was this consistent one where it was like, okay, 2 of the 3 teams are the same. Okay, no, only 1 of the 3 teams are the same. Like there was a lot of little changes. Carolina, we know for sure based on their playoff record recently that they are the consistent thing going on in that division. But yeah, I would agree with you that there's less of a guard, so it could definitely be the one we see the biggest change. Or maybe they just continue to remain fluid and nobody's really taking like a stand and consistently making the playoffs, and it's just kind of a weird time there. But I like it because it is funny. Like every year we're just kind of saying the same teams, like, oh yeah, this team's gonna make it. But I think you definitely have to look at, okay, where's their core at? What is their prospect pool look like? What are, all those factors are definitely important. All right, guys, good stuff. Well, just a reminder to everyone that for over 75 years, the Hockey News has been the ultimate hockey fix, and you can get 12 issues delivered straight to you with stories, stats, a bonus issue, everything you need to kick things off and get in on all the hockey news happening around the league. So head over to thn.com to check it out. All right, well, we mentioned the Penguins there earlier and the lovely start that they're off to under the guidance of first-time head coach Dan Muse. But in that victory they had on Tuesday night over Vancouver, Sidney Crosby officially passed Mario Lemieux for the most points, regular season and playoffs all combined, in Penguins history. So he is at 1,896. Lemieux stuck there at 1,895. So it's another great time to ask the all-important question, who is the greatest Penguin of all time? Is it Crosby or is it Lemieux?
I don't want to answer. There's not a right answer. Like they're both outstanding, and like, to your point, like both of basically put up the same points. They both won multiple cups. They both saved the franchise at different points of that franchise's history. I'll say Crosby mostly just because of recency bias. He's the guy I got to see an interview live, whereas I was a kid watching Mario, and Mario, there's probably a good argument to be made whether Mario is as good or better than Wayne Gretzky if he had been healthy. And with Sid, I think he's going to go down as possibly the greatest, classiest, most gentlemanly player to have played the game. And like I said, recency bias, I'll go with Sid the kid here.
Yeah, Ryan, like when you mentioned earlier, it was like picking your two children, like being born and raised in Pittsburgh. I don't actually feel that I can answer this question because it's just like sacrilegious to say that one is better than the other. And what's interesting is that I don't think either of them would want it, right? Like those are their personalities, right? Crosby doesn't care about being the greatest of anything. He just cares about winning and being a great leader. Mario was really a lot of the same. But if you have to pick, who are you going with?
Well, if I had to pick, what I would say is I think Crosby is now the best Penguin of all time, but Lemieux was the most important of all time because of, the battle he had not only with his back, but obviously, with lymphoma as well. Coming back from that was incredible. And, the amount of points he puts up, or he put up at the time. And as Mike mentioned, what he meant to the franchise, essentially saving it, when they tanked to get him in the first place, and what he meant to the city. And then, of course, he becomes owner and helps shepherd Crosby into the league, right? But I think if you look at just like what Crosby is able to accomplish in this era, where the competition is even harder than it was in the 80s, fewer teams, the game wasn't as international back then. There weren't as many American players because you weren't getting the same grassroots as we see now. I think that, Crosby, what he has accomplished was even more difficult than what Lemieux did. And again, with Lemieux, you're talking about a player who is maybe like top 5 all time in the NHL. But I think we have to, at this point, consider Crosby as top 5 in the history of the NHL.
Okay.
Yeah, fully on board with all of that.
Yeah, well said.
They both live down the street from each other in good old Pennsylvania. So they're awesome. I was, when I was living in Pittsburgh, I saw Lemieux sitting out on his front porch handing out Halloween candy. Just like a regular old guy. Like, I mean, you don't have to be doing that. You open up the gates and let the kids come through.
Nice.
He's just
he better be giving out full-size bars candy.
Well, you're getting the big bars if you go to the Lemieux.
I was going to say.
Just gotta stop by that one.
There
On the
You
you
list.
go.
snack size, and I'm changing my answer there to right.
Okay, perfect. All right, how about this? Yeah, Hurricanes and the Avalanche announced that they'll be wearing those awesome throwback alternate jerseys. So we are getting a Whalers versus Nordiques matchup a couple times. I think this season we'll see the jerseys, but the direct matchup is awesome. So is this one of the best head-to-head jersey matchups that we're going to see in quite a long time? And if not, what's another good one that you'd like to see?
I'll answer and say yes.
This is super
It's
hot
pretty
one.
darn good.
Yeah.
I love the Nordiques
Yeah.
jersey, and I love the Whalers logo. And I'm a sucker for green jerseys. I think there's not enough green in the NHL. Like, really, it's just Minnesota, and I
Dallas?
really dig those old Minnesota North Star
Yeah.
jerseys. Like, that probably is up there for my top jersey picks. So yeah, if you had to pick between the Whalers and the Nordiques, I'll go Nordiques just because I still think Quebec City deserves a team again. So maybe this is a
Okay.
push in that direction.
I like it. All right. Well, Ryan, you're our Jersey guy. So what do you think about this this throwback matchup and anything that might be able to rival it?
Yeah, I love it. Whalers Nordiques is classic 80s, especially if they play Brass Bonanza at the arena. That would be fantastic. The only thing I could think of that would rival it, because I agree with Mike, I love the old Minnesota North Stars. So if you did like an original six expansion game where it was Minnesota North Stars and the original LA Kings jerseys, I know they've busted out those versions over the years, and it's always great. The Forum blue, which is purple, let's face it, and gold. That would be like, it would be extremely gaudy, and I would be so here for it.
You know what? Actually, when I tweeted this out, I said like best matchup ever. And one of the people that responded to it on Twitter put a photo, and I think it was those two jerseys matched up against each other. And they were like,
There
this
you go.
was so sick. And so I'm totally with you on that. Those are two elite old school combinations. I like it. We'll looking forward to it. We'll see it on Thursday, October 23rd. All right. How about this? The NHL has officially canceled the Olympic send-off event that they had planned at UBS Arena, which was given to the Islanders after they wanted to replace the All-Star game that they got. So the NHL opting to allow players now to focus on their travel and preparation for Milan. And now UBS Arena and the Islanders will host the traditional All-Star skills competition game. Good stuff on February 2027. So what do we think? Like, yay or nay about this decision? Is it almost just like they really never should have planned this send-off to begin with? What do we think?
Yeah, this was a pipe dream, or just way too much. In a season where the schedule is already being condensed because of the Olympics. Like, again, I was talking with Bill Guerin, the GM of Team USA, and he was already complaining about, or not complaining, but just saying like, it's going to be tough for the players and the team. Like, you're basically, you're going to the Olympic break, you fly there, you land, you practice once, and you're playing. Like, there's not a whole lot of ramp up time. So to kind of cram an event like this into the schedule already was asking way too much of these players.
Yeah, the guys are probably so pumped this is canceled.
Yeah. No, I'm with it. This is like, yeah, it was just like too much. And I understand they were like, it was supposed to be like a make good for the Islanders, but I think even the Islanders would be much more happy to have a full event that people care about 1 year later.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Although I will say, I mean, at this point, since we got our special Four Nations tournament, I don't know if anyone cares about another All-Star game ever, because that was just so much better.
Yeah.
But that's all right. We'll give it a shot. Maybe they can speed up the format and work on that slightly, because those things they can drag. All right, last one, guys, real quick before we wrap up today. The Blue Jays are going to the World Series, taking on the Dodgers. So last time I talked to you guys, we were predicting if they were going to get one win in the series against the Mariners. Here we are now. They won in Game 7, and they are headed to the World Series. So I want each of you to give me your World Series predictions.
All right. Well, when I played MLB The Show, I played as the Blue Jays, and we played the Dodgers in the World Series, and I won. So I'm going to say Jays in 6.
Ooh. How many years ago was that, Ryan? Like, who was on that team?
It was mostly the same team. I had Guerrero, I had Bichette. The pitching staff was completely different. I had Gossman. But yeah, I think it was like 2 or 3 years ago.
Yeah, I'm going Jays in 7, obviously. Like, I got to pick the Jays. I do think it's going to be their toughest challenge. Like, the Dodgers are just stacked when you look at their lineup and their rotation. But I think, I trust in Vlad. I trust in George Springer, who our producer said wears green batting gloves because he grew up in Connecticut and is a huge Hartford Whalers fan, I guess. So yeah, Vlad for the MVP again, and go Jays, go.
All right, super quick follow-up. I know we're running out of time. Did Vlad wearing the Matthews jersey for Game 7 break the curse?
No, it did not.
Because then Matthews wore a Guerrero jersey and lost. So
yeah, he put that curse back on the Jays, I think.
Yeah,
that's all right. You guys are You're a baseball country. You're a baseball town now. That's okay. It was awesome though. The lead up to that, seeing him wearing that jersey for a Game 7, and people were like, "You sure about that?"
Yeah,
that's a bold choice, but paid off for him. Don't think it's going to make much of a difference for Toronto. They need a little more help than that, but we'll see. All right, guys, good stuff. Go Jays. Good luck in the World Series to those guys. That does it for this episode of the Hockey News Big Show. I'm Katie Gaus with Ryan Kennedy and Michael Traikos, and we will see you all next time.